in, folks. Settle in, people. You don't want me to start name calling? Yes, you can cross my stage. Please. Why don't you just poop right on the floor? Feel zero respect in this room. Zero respect. I'm chewing gum and I'm saying I don't respect you. Isn't that interesting? Hi, everybody. Did you have good sessions? Excellent. I'm so happy. Did you get to know some people you didn't know before? Good. That is a good thing. You're bonding. Did you break out from your cruise or stay on your cruise? You ate, didn't you? I feel you ate. I feel that afternoon thing. Get out of that afternoon thing. Applause. Applause. Quick, quick, quick. Everybody just stand up really quick and sit down. Just stand up and sit down. Up and down. I just want to make sure you're alive and that you have energy because this is we have such an incredible, powerful, amazing second half that I just want you to be present. And I'm really excited to kick this off with Joel Simon. If you don't know Joel Simon, he's the executive director of the Committee to Protect Journalists. It is an incredibly important organization. If we do not have journalists who are safe and protected, we just don't win as a society. That is just the bottom line. And with it just... And the only way we can often get to the truth is by really brave people going into really dangerous places, like Yemen, like the Sudan, like the website of the NSA, just places that people need to go so that we can be smarter and more informed. And it makes it even doubly disgusting when the gravitas of Bill O'Reilly and Brian Williams are like, yeah, I was in the... You were in the what? The bathroom? Yes, you were in the bathroom, where other people were actually in harm's way. So to talk about why... Seriously, I mean, it's funny to laugh about Bill O'Reilly, but like the disservice it does to folks who are actually living and doing it is like kind of profound. So I'll shit all over Bill O'Reilly, and then we're going to hear the seriousness, and then I'll shit all over Bill O'Reilly a little bit more. Got that live stream? Great. Like Fox has always been so kind to me. Oh, I just screwed my meal ticket on Fox. So without further ado, a man who has won awards for his work, a man who is an incredible public servant and an incredible warrior. Please welcome Joel Simon.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Hello. Well, it's great to be here. This is relatively warm weather for me, so I'm excited. Got to walk around without 5,000 layers. So we had a lot of uplifting talks this morning. This talk is going to be a little less uplifting because the subject matter is bleak. I'm just going to be frank with you and lay that out there. So you heard, I'm the executive director of the Committee to Protect Journalists. I have a new book out. It's called The New Censorship Inside the Global Battle for Media Freedom. That's my Twitter handle, and let's go. So before I was a press freedom advocate, I was myself a journalist, and I worked for over a decade in Latin America. I covered lots of interesting stories, and I want to talk about this one story that I covered back in Mexico in 1994. Now, January 1st, 1994 was the beginning of the North American Free Trade Agreement. That's when it went into effect. Mexico was supposed to launch into the modern era, but there was this group like nobody expected of kind of ragtag revolutionaries that showed up in the southern state of Chiapas. And this guy, whose name was Subcomandante Marcos, was their leader. And they sort of came on the scene. There were a couple shots fired. There were some people who got killed. It was a little bit ugly for a while. And then they retreated into this remote area of Mexico called the Lacandon jungle. And they kind of holed up there. And they just sort of invited the press to come talk to them. Now, this was an irresistible story. And basically what we quickly realized was that the guns were kind of props and the the fighting was a bit of theater, and this was really an information war. And in order to wage information war, they needed the press. The Zapatistas needed the press, and this guy was a media genius. Everyone went to Chiapas, and myself included, we wanted an interview. I spent a week kind of hanging out, waiting to talk to the guy, sleeping in these really cramped, hot barracks where they were all, the Zapatista rebels were all living. And then one night he showed up, and I sort of saw the glow of his pipe, and I was like, oh, that's Marcos. It was the middle of the night, and he woke me up, and we had this, there were a bunch of journalists there, and we had this amazing conversation about kind of the goals of the revolution, what he was trying to achieve, and he threw in all sorts of funny bits, like he was in the United States, and he was in Dallas, and he worked as a Dallas cowboy cheerleader. And he worked in a gay bar in San Francisco, which was quite a funny thing to say at the time. And the reason he was talking to the press, and not just the international press, but the Mexican press, was because he had to. He had to. The only way to wage information war in that moment in time was to mediate it through the press. And so that was the strategy. Now, let's fast forward 20 years. This is how you wage media war. I don't even like to show you a picture of this guy. I think we all know who he is. He's Jihadi John. He's the Islamic State's executioner. This is a screen grab from the horrible Foley execution video. I knew Foley. He was a colleague of mine. I don't like to even show this stuff because there is no way to show it without advancing the propaganda of the Islamic State. But this is the way you wage media war now. Journalists, you don't have to talk to them. You don't have to mediate through them. They can become props in your terrorizing execution videos. Why is that? It's because the power dynamic between journalists and the people they cover has been completely transformed, and it has been transformed by technology. So this is a graph, and I can quickly explain what this is. So this is looking at people, internet users over the last 20 years. So when Marcos was on the scene, we're kind of at the bottom left there, and what you can see is that basically, 10% of people were online in the United States. Basically, nobody was online in Mexico, and the trajectory is up, 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 up. Now, 77% of people are online in the developed world. Maybe a third of the people in Mexico are online. 40% of people around the world. So we are living in this unprecedented age of information. The quantities of information available to us are absolutely staggering, and yet the amount of information to which we have access blinds us to the way that censorship functions today and the huge gaps in the information that's available to us as a result of violence and censorship. So, what's happened during the internet, the internet age? What has been the trajectory? I want to take you through a map that is 20 years apart. This is a map that the international NGO Freedom House puts together every year. I have some problems with their methodology. See me during office hours, I'll explain that. But I think it's a pretty good snapshot of what freedom of the press looked like in 1999. Green, that's good. Yellow, that's partially free. Red, not so good. 20 years later. Now, why they changed red to purple, I have no idea. I like the red. You'll have to talk to them. But the purple is bad, okay? So, just look at the countries that have flipped. Russia was partially free. Now it's, forget it. Mexico, violence against the press has made it less free. Venezuela, even South Africa, which in the end of apartheid had a great opening, and the ANC has become entrenched in South Africa. Not quite as pretty a picture anymore. And I'm sorry, folks, but the news gets worse. These are journalists killed during this period. This is that era of internet expansion, but this is supposed to be the golden age of information. But the people who bring us the information and the systems that deliver it, the people are dying and the systems are under threat. You can see there's no good news here. And in fact, the numbers are up. The last 3 years have been the most deadly years we've ever recorded. This is based on our data from the Committee to Protect Journalists. Journalists in prison. Sorry, folks. More bad news. You can see the last 3 years have been the highest rate of incarceration of journalists around the world. So the situation is terrible. Why is this? What's happening with these journalists in prison? Why is there just this global crackdown? And it has to do with countries using kind of state security and national security frameworks to jail critical journalists. I'm talking about China, I'm talking about Iran, I'm talking about Ethiopia, and I'm talking about countries like Turkey. Now, I had an opportunity, I was just in Turkey last fall, and I had an opportunity to meet with the country's president, President Erdogan. And Turkey used to be one of the world's leading jailers of journalists. There's been some progress. Some journalists have been released from prison. We wanted to talk to him about his press freedom record. I was in there with a delegation from the Committee to Protect Journalists. And he started out this session by lashing out at the media. There was no ground given. The New York Times, CNN, the Turkish media, tendentious, unfair. The media is an opposition force. And now Erdogan is what I call a democratator. What does that mean? That means he wins elections. He wins elections. He has legitimate popularity. But he uses the popularity conferred on him by the ballot box to undermine the institutions that limit his power, including the media. And this is a new strategy of repression that's highly effective, that allows these leaders to marginalize the press and to hide their actions behind a facade of democratic legitimacy. And what Erdogan said to me that was really shocking is he said, increasingly, I'm against the internet every day. Now, if this is how he talks to a group of global press freedom advocates, I can only imagine what he says in private. But he's not alone. Leaders all over the world who fear this information share his perspective. And without going into the details, I can tell you that there's a global consortium, if you will, of internet restrictors forming, looking for strategies to undermine the global internet as the internet itself as a shared global resource, and they're gaining ground. Okay, so let's get back to who is bringing us the information on the ground. So we know what these technologies, these wonderful technologies that have transformed communication, have done to the media industry. And they don't have the resources they once had. They're not putting people on the ground in the same way. So we are relying on local journalists and sometimes eyewitnesses. You know, remember Tahrir Square, remember citizen journalists. You know, these are people in many instances who are bringing us the news that we need. They're part of this global information ecosystem. And there are places around the world, Pakistan, the tribal areas of Pakistan or Iraq that are simply too dangerous for Western reporters, and we're relying on local journalists in these countries to bring us the news, and they are being killed in record numbers. Syria is an information black hole. There's a military campaign going on, and we are blind. We have no idea what is happening in Syria because journalists can't get in there. International journalists haven't been in there for some time, and local Syrian journalists and eyewitnesses it's even more difficult for them to share information. And if you look at these statistics, 80 journalists have been killed. Most of those are freelancers. Most of those are local journalists. 90 journalists have been abducted. We know about Foley and Sotloff, and we know about the Japanese journalist Kenji Goto, who was just killed. But most of them are Syrian. And of the 20 journalists who are still missing, almost all of them are Syrian. Okay, journalists behind bars. Most of them worked online. There's an information war going on. The technology, we hear wonderful stories about the technology and how it allows this to happen. But what we're not understanding is the ways in which repressive governments are using the technology to crack down on the media itself. Now, there's a journalist that some of you may have heard of, Maziar Bahari. He's an Iranian-Canadian journalist. He was in Iran. He covered the dispute following the 2009 presidential election. He was arrested. He spent 4 months in an Iranian prison. Jon Stewart just made a movie about him. Hopefully some of you have seen it. It's amazing. But when Maziar got out of prison, I had a conversation with him, and I said, Maziar, what did they interrogate you about? And he was like, they wanted my Facebook password. They wanted my email password. They wanted all my social media. And if you think about what social media is, all the stuff that an average person puts on social media, your friends, your contacts, your opinions, all of that stuff, that's the kind of stuff that interrogators used to pull your fingernails out to get. Now they get that password, they've got it. They can use the same technology to dismantle networks And they're doing it, and they're doing it in a wholesale way. And I'm not just talking about Iran. This is a global phenomenon. We know about NSA surveillance in the United States, but this is a question of this technology that the NSA has that's terrifying, that allows it to do this. It's being disseminated, this powerful surveillance tools, to governments all over the world. Governments are building this capacity, and it has, if they gain it, it has the ability to undermine the internet, again, as a shared global system. Okay, so what does the new censorship consist of? Well, it's the democrators, this new style of authoritarian government, this new style of repression based on democratic legitimacy. It's much harder to combat because the repression is sometimes hidden. The terror dynamic, that's what I'm talking about here, where journalists have lost their power in relation to the people they cover, so they're no longer indispensable. They collectively have lost their information monopoly, and that's a good thing in many ways, but let's recognize that it kept them safe in certain situations. Online censorship and surveillance is growing. The tools that we've used to create this information revolution are being exploited by repressive governments, and their capacity is growing. And this is something we must be vigilant for. This is a fight that is looming. All right, so now that I've totally bummed you out, I can't pretend that I've got like a lot of good news here, but I have some ideas, and I have some things that I want us to think about. First of them is this, Article 19. Most people don't know about Article 19, but this is kind of our global First Amendment. This is kind of what we have to work with, and it's really pretty good. This is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is one of the founding documents of the United Nations. This right applies to everyone in the world unconditionally. And you get it, you get the right to say what you want, and you can hold opinions and blah, blah. But the important thing I want to point to you here is that this right exists regardless of frontiers. This is the only human right that's explicitly transnational. It's explicitly transnational. Governments have no right to restrict this basic freedom based on borders. So it is a challenge to sovereignty. And this universal right has come into conflict. This is the nature of the conflict with 19th century notions of sovereignty, for example, China. China is sort of, their framework is what happens in my borders, we control. So what is this thing that's happening outside of our borders that we can't control? That's not acceptable. And China is fighting very, very hard to change the global architecture of the internet so that it can control it more easily within its territory. And then you have this same right coming into conflict with more traditional societies which have their own concepts of, say, honor and sacred symbols. And that's kind of what happened with the Charlie Hebdo attack in France. I mean, that was really a transnational attack. That was really an attack sort of organized externally. And why should people who are not in France, really, the people who perpetrated the attack were French, but the organizers were not French. Why are they so obsessed with this? Because this communication, because of the technology, is now global. What Charlie Hebdo does is global. And this is unacceptable to certain groups around the world. So this transnational right has come into conflict as never before. And what the Charlie Hebdo attacks tell us is that there is no safe haven in the global battle for free expression. Okay, so now how can we fight this new censorship? First, let's recognize that we live in the information age, that information is power, that information is a shared global resource, but it's not evenly distributed. We need information in order to confront the global challenges that we face, whether we're talking about global warming or epidemic disease or conflict or human rights. Information and our access to information, global access to information, is essential to our ability to address these enormous challenges. So what can we do? Well, we can, there's some ideas here. We can expose the democrators. the effectiveness of this kind of system of repression depends on it remaining hidden to a certain extent. So the democratators I mentioned, President Erdogan, I'd certainly put Putin in that category, the late Hugo Chavez of Venezuela, Orban in Hungary. There are many other examples. These folks are using this new strategy of repression. They need to be exposed. We need to find ways to make frontline news gatherers, and recognizing that many of them are non-traditional, give them access to the safety and support that they need to get the job done. We need to speak out when there is violence committed against, again, not just traditional journalists. We have to get out of this mindset of thinking about, the kind of correspondent in the vest full of camera lenses. That is so outdated. Let's put that out of our mind. The frontline news gatherers are often local journalists in their own countries who are feeding this information system. They need our help and support. I've talked about the internet. We need to do this within the context of a global freedom of expression coalition. We need to bring together all the folks who have a stake in this battle. Right now, they don't really see their common interests. I consider that, that includes international business. That includes, of course, the media community, the tech community, international civil society. All of these folks need to come together to find a way to fight for their shared interest. But the most fundamental thing we need to do, and the most difficult challenge before us, is to somehow recalibrate that power dynamic, to ensure that the people who are on the front lines gathering the news that we all need and we all depend on have our support and are valued. And I think that we can do that by thinking and considering, where does our information come from? It doesn't come out of the air. There are people who gather this. And the other framework I think we need to move away from is this reliance on technology. This is not a problem that will be solved by technology. Technology, to a certain extent, created it. That's not to say that the technology is not transformative and welcome. It's an incredibly powerful tool, but we have to recognize and consider the side effects. Now, we don't want to go back to the Marcos era. We can't go back to the Marcos era in which the media mediated everything. The media had this information monopoly. The media was the gatekeeper. We don't want to go back to that. I mean, that was certainly an exciting moment to see that information war waged in that way, but there's no returning to that. But what we need to do is to figure out a way to recognize, honor, appreciate, and consider the journalists in the broadest sense on the front line bringing us the news, and recognize that the central battle of our age is the fight for global free expression. Thank you very much.
That was awesome.
Thank you.
Do you make lists in social media on Twitter? Do you? A really good sort of tool for all of this is when the Arab Spring happened, I was following as many journalists as I could who were covering Egypt, and I kept them in a list. And they're journalists who cover the Middle East, journalists I'd never seen before, but some of my friends had followed them, and I made a list. And to really pay attention to those lists, because the first line I feel like of defense is following a couple of good people, because they know who some of the other people are, right? So if you're following them and retweeting them, when crises are happening and brewing up around the world, you have lists of people who are really good and smart and powerful on those things. And that can go for healthcare. That can go for reproductive justice. That can go for almost anything. Everything that Joel said, you can get into your hands, in your social media lists, and start forming those things to support those people. And it's really key, because just starting out knowing a couple of key people, following them and asking them. If you were to go out to Jeremy Scahill or anybody and say, who are the people that you talk to that have Twitter handles that I can follow? If you were to at them, they would be thrilled. So do that because that's really important. The other thing I learned is make sure somebody has all of your passwords so that if you're ever abducted, you can give them instructions to change the password immediately. And then when they get back to you, you can change it back. I'm here to help. I bring the knowledge. But the other thing I will say that I think is really important, and I'm just sort of freeballing right now while these guys sit down and come in. Hi, welcome back. Hi, guys. And that is, I think that, and tell me if you fall into this category, when you heard Jon Stewart was retiring, did you have a nervous breakdown? Right. I think that we have relied on him to do things that the corporate media stopped doing, and there are things that he's not required to do. So support people who are out there in the field doing things, and also other satirists who are doing things. Find out who they are as well, because the world will not end. The show will continue, but also there are people doing really good work that if we elevate them up, it's just more voices that you can also amplify into the world to shut down the stuff that bums you out. So having said that, hi. I think we're settled. I think we're good. And I love that this next speaker is coming up. It's a really nice dovetail to Joel, because while everything Joel said was true, I think sometimes we get like swallowed up in like, oh my God, people keep getting dumber and there's more media. Yeah, I think that might be true. But also, there's so many avenues with which to like see things, feel things, read people. And, you know, Carlos Roig is going to tell us like, you know, journalism is dead, long live journalism, because things are happening all of the time. And he went from working at USA Today to having an independent consulting firm and just following the trajectory, following basically the media, which I think is a super good thing to always remember, that we can't always rely on the behemoths. We have to create our own noise in our own place. So without any more me talking, please welcome Carlos Roig. Did I do okay?
Yeah, great. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Liz. I'm going to slide this over here. I love the orange stand. So, following Joel's talk, obviously, what he was talking about, very, very heavy stuff. I'm going to touch on journalism as well. And I want to start with some irony. I'm going to stand here today and discuss the general demise and confusion of one of our nation's most important institutions. And then, after tracing the downfall, I'm going to tell you that we should follow their lead. Come on, it'll be fun. So let's play word association. When I say journalism, what jumps to mind? Maybe it's back in the day, black and white, Edward R. Murrow with smarts and swagger and an ill-advised cigarette dangling from his lips. Or perhaps it's Walter Cronkite fighting back tears and telling us from Dallas, Texas, The Flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. Maybe you don't think radio or TV. Maybe the word journalism conjures accountability, investigations, Woodward, Bernstein, and I'm not a crook. Or maybe it's a romantic notion. A Sunday morning, a hot cup of coffee, an all-American breakfast in the big fat New York Times. Perhaps you think of today's morass, great journalists still plying their trade, but surrounded by the polar opposite truthiness of Bill O'Reilly and Rachel Maddow. Maybe when I say journalism, you think of two comedians, Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert, who have recently hung up their fake fedoras and ditched their non-existent press passes. Here's the thing, and Joel's talk really reinforced this. No matter what images you land on, this truth is undeniable. Journalism is still important. It still matters. It still digs beneath the surface and forces answers, even when the truth is stubbornly hidden in plain view. In spite of all that, though, Journalism is mired in a great financial fire, a technological convulsion, a furious downsizing that has created gaps in coverage and thrown valuable civic attention up for grabs. So, what does journalism have to do with public interest communications? For many, many years, decades in fact, professional communicators relied heavily on their ability to reach and convince particular reporters at particular news outlets. Their outreach strategies centered on the chase for someone else's perfect story. Even when they found the person and grabbed their attention, they had to sit back and hope, please, please do not screw this up. That one journalist would capture the right perspective on the right issue and use the right words. A project's glory or demise would frequently rest in the hands of the all-powerful journalist. Now, while I am dabbling in irony today, I'm not some knee-jerk social media is everything acolyte who's going to tell you that traditional media outreach tactics are dead. They're not. But they have receded from their central importance. They are meaningful, they are components of our strategies, but they are not the be-all, end-all. A two-line mention of your project in the New York Times may cheer some, but it is perishable. It is not sustainable, and it must be paired with other tactics that tell stories and attract attention. This gathering of public interest communicators, it's truly, truly unique. We fill gaps in the public's knowledge base. We educate and spur movement. We take complicated issues and find a way to bust through the clutter so people notice, listen, and act. But our work is increasingly about identifying and building those other tactics that can fill the breach as journalism's singular influence wanes. So I'm not laying a wreath at journalism's tombstone. And if I've worried some of you by apparently tearing down the very fabric of an open and independent press, well, don't fret. In fact, let me swing the pendulum the other way. I am a former journalist. I don't say this like a recovering addict, or even as a lament for some bygone days. I say it because it is part of the bedrock of the way that I look at and think about public interest communications. When I worked in newsrooms, my peers had varied interests, but the extremely important church-state separation between editorial on one side and business on the other meant that many journalists didn't look to other industries for clues about how they could innovate. It would have been sacrilege, and I did it anyway, but to tell your colleagues that Coca-Cola's or GE's approach to storytelling could, heck, it should, force journalists to think differently about audience and content. So now, as a content-oriented communicator, one of my key points is this. Newsrooms know the process to tell stories, to tease out nuanced information, to make sense of and translate complicated data sets, to form connections that help crystallize a muddled world, to chart a plain language path beset by wonks and subject matter experts. All of those skills, if we can harness them, are exactly the things that we need in our work. That newsroom process, that logic, can transform the way we approach this communication work. So we need to read, research, report, question, listen, verify, test, refine, understand an issue down to its bones, and then craft creative solutions. It's not sufficient for us to say that we are storytellers and then deliver press releases. It's not adequate to slap a news link on a website and then populate it only when we have a program launch or an annual conference. We can and should apply the best principles of journalism to our communications work. This is about artfully telling stories with clarity and depth, not bludgeoning our readers with convoluted program titles or acronyms. We have to meet our audiences where they are, speak to them in their own language, and if we're successful, propel them to the change that we envision. We know that people are spending more time than ever consuming information online, in apps, and through mobile devices. In many cases, news organization websites are not their primary destination for knowledge. Journalists would be heartbroken to hear that. Instead, they use a complex mix of search, social media, niche sites, news aggregators, and email to find their information. If we hope to have impact, we must develop strategies that capture a prominent place in that stream. Decision makers, whether they are legislators torn between two policy approaches or parents grappling with their children's poor health, place a high value on thorough, detailed, reasoned content that deepens understanding and leads to smarter decisions. Those decision makers, legislative, parental, everything in between, used to look primarily to the news media to make sense of the world around them. Now, many of us wake to a smartphone alarm. And squinting at the glare in the darkness, we review push notifications, text, email, and social. Many of us, and think about this, we now consume more content and we formulate more conclusions before we get out of bed than we might have a generation ago by reading an entire newspaper or watching the nightly news. We fill downtime by checking if anything new has popped in. We pull to refresh. We follow links wherever they lead. Our David Brinkley's, Christiane Amanpour's, and Gwen Eifel's may actually be Emily from high school, or Jamal from your first job, or your Uncle Richie, who somehow found you and friended you on Facebook. When Uncle Richie is pushing links at you, and you know that you click on his links in spite of yourself, then there is certainly space for individual non-media organizations like us, like the people you represent, to craft unique content that serves the public interest. If we can educate or surprise or enrage or delight with stories that are rooted in facts and precision, then we can all play a part in embracing journalism's public service mission. And perhaps we, as public interest communicators, can help to improve the human condition in the process. Thank you.
You know what else I find? Are people coming in? Come on in, folks. The other thing that is so fascinating about what we're doing in this space and how much social media plays a part is that the people who disagreed with us have always been out there, right? But now they're just out there and they get to tell you instantly. So what does that do to change what you put out, right? For me, what I know is there's two ways to go. Some people just like barf out stuff, right? It's not thought out, it's just barfed out. But you're going to screw yourself if you are barfing shit out on social media. Because the bottom line is, the one thing we've learned from social media is that you're always going to disappoint. Something you say is going to be found by somebody else with offense, with righteous indignation. Sometimes they are right, sometimes it's just an opinion and they disagree with your approach. So what we need to do in this space, especially with social media being so prevalent, is to actually be more thoughtful and to be able to defend your ideas, because that is what you're going to have to do. Have you thought it through? Like, is your philosophy something that when people come at you, was it worth saying? Does it make a larger point, and can you defend it? Ask yourself that a lot when you're going on Twitter, when you're making a statement about what you're doing, who you're activating for, what it means. Can you defend it? Have that be the biggest question you ask yourself. Can I defend this? Do I believe it? Or am I just saying this because I'm fucking pissed and I'm piling on? Piling on is fun, but it's also like, that means you're part of a larger mob mentality that you have to ask yourself if you want to be part of it. Having said that, let's move on. I was kind of a downer there. I didn't mean to be a downer, but sometimes I just feel like that's where we win. when you can be like, I know you disagree with me, but here's how I came to this conclusion, and it works for me, and it works for people around me. And if I'm not actually actively adding to destroying the greater good, how much do you want to prioritize being pissed at me? Just a question. Anyway, oh God, I want to kick off with something that's also kind of a downer. But okay, so anyway, it's not that much of a downer. But here's something that really gets my panties in a wad. And I know it's existed for a long time, but again, when we are just amplified with ideas, it's just more and more. And that is the idea that poverty right now in the spaces that we live is somehow become a character flaw. And it really, really pisses me off. It really does. You know, we judge people based on being poor. Yeah. And what pisses me off even worse is that we have people who are wonderful people who are dedicated to making sure that people make a minimum wage. Minimum wage. Because we have to get a minimum wage before we can get a living wage. It's unacceptable, right? And it's also frustrating, but the fact that we have people who take a breath and understand process and know we have to get from not so poor to managing to living is really astounding. And I feel like so excited to introduce these next two people who have worked tirelessly why a minimum wage matters and have done a brilliant job with Oakland, which they're going to talk about. And also, I just want to say, Jennifer is also a clinic escort, so she has a special place in my heart for clinic escorting. And so I'm really excited to hear them talk and to hear them talk about what they're doing in Oakland and why, for God's sakes, a minimum wage matters. Please welcome Jim Ross and Jennifer Weber.
Thank you.
We're starting with the video.
I can't build my own life on
510.
I think the biggest thing most people don't realize is that minimum wage workers or low wage income workers are not teenagers.
When you pay people more money, the community benefits by getting more money into the local businesses.
Raising to $12.25 would mean a whole lot.
De poder ahorrar un poquito.
We need to raise the minimum wage.
Raise the minimum wage to $12.25.
Vote yes on Measure FF.
Vote yes on Measure FF.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. For those of you we didn't meet in the beer line last night at the Welcome Rally, I'm Jennifer Weber.
And I'm Jim Ross.
And as Liz said, we were the strategists on the campaign this past fall on a ballot initiative to raise the minimum wage, establish a minimum wage, and also paid sick days in Oakland, California. So as the lead strategist, we oversaw the paid media, the earned media, the field plan and organizing, the coalition building.
We didn't do windows.
We didn't do windows, but we did work with and manage the steering committee, which was made up of labor and community organizations. And today we want to talk with you in particular about how we used the timing of the media, and in particular earned media, to drive the politics of the campaign. Measure FF, as we said, was an initiative, and what that means is that our coalition drafted the language that it wanted to be an ordinance in Oakland, and we went out and gathered a requisite number of signatures of voters to qualify that for the ballot. Once we did that, voters got to make that decision. We had some early guidance from polling. We knew that our issue was very popular, and we also got some good insight into who our best messengers would be, who the voters would trust and want to hear from during the campaign, and that helped us guide our campaign plan.
So Tolstoy said that every unhappy family is different. Well, if that's the case, then every campaign is an unhappy family. We put together a campaign plan, but just as importantly, we also developed what would our opposition's campaign plan be? Because we wanted to run a campaign where we drove the discussion, where we got to drive the timing of the campaign, and where we were advocating that we weren't responding. One of the great sayings in politics is if you're responding, you're losing. And we wrote a plan so that we could drive the discussion. So it's very important, obviously, have a plan. Over the course of the campaign, there were some really key milestones or points that we saw early on. So, believe it or not, the first thing we did, as communicators, this might sound strange, we decided not to talk to anybody. For the first 2 months of the campaign, we went out and focused on gathering the 32,000 signatures we needed to qualify this measure for the ballot, building infrastructure, and creating suspense. So in the world of politics, in the world of like the little echo chambers that always develop in these things, people are always kind of, well, what's going on? What are they saying? And by not talking, we built suspense. So when we turned in our signatures, when we submitted our signatures and we did a huge communications effort, a huge push, it had real impact because we hadn't been dribbing and drabbing things out to folks. In fact, we were told later by our opponents that, oh, we didn't think you were going to qualify. We weren't worried about it. So it gave us not just a huge communications advantage, but it gave us a structural advantage as well. That advantage gave us real momentum that helped us drive through the second landmark point that we had. And that was, there was a possibility, we saw at the beginning of the campaign, that our opponents could get the Oakland City Council to place a competing measure, a watered-down measure, on the ballot against us. That was something that we looked at it and it was like, oh, it's going to be tough for them to run a no campaign and win, but what they could do is get a watered-down measure and run it against it. And the amount of press, the momentum we built from our signature turn-in allowed us to basically drive right through that. They tried to do something at the city council and it failed, but really, that really created the momentum for us. And the whole nature of this campaign really just created an enormous amount of coverage and something that we really could drive every single day.
Right. And as you can see from this slide, we did have really an extraordinary amount of media coverage for a local ballot measure in the Bay Area where there's, something amazing happening every day. And we had a story on average every 3 days during the time that we turned in the signatures to and through Election Day. And, we were able to monetize that for our clients and show that it had just a huge value. But one thing I want to say about this, and it's been touched on by some speakers earlier today, and that is that, the mechanics, the seemingly simple mechanics of earned media and what you do to get it really matter. Are you putting out an advisory? Are you pitching it? Are you just in regular communication with the news outlets so they know what's going on? A lot of the stories that we got, the coverage that we got, nobody sent a truck to our event. Nobody sent a reporter to our event. They used B-roll from past events. They read, our news advisory about what was going to be happening later that day. So we were able to control that message as well. And so, again, those mechanics of just making that happen were really important in letting the outlets know about it. The other thing we did was we had to mitigate against some anticipated negative coverage. We knew that our local paper, the Oakland Tribune, would likely editorialize against our measure, saying it was too much too soon, that there were no exceptions for certain groups of people, certain nonprofit organizations wanted exceptions, tipped workers, restaurants, etc. Our measure is, as Liz said, the minimum wage for everyone. So in order to mitigate against that negative editorial we expected, we really worked with columnists, and one in particular at the Tribune, to have her talk with people, have her talk with low-wage workers, get that story out so that she would have a positive opinion voice in that same outlet where we did get an editorial opposed to the measure. Another thing that we did was in our regular communications with our supporters, we told them what was going on. We gave them message points so that when they were having one-on-one conversations, whether on their social media feeds or at a coffee shop with a friend or over a dinner with their family, if the topic of the minimum wage came up, they could just say, this is what's going on, and they really served as messengers one-on-one for us.
As this chart shows, we found early that the media was going to cover this.
So we. That video?
Oh yeah. Go ahead.
A campaign for a higher minimum wage officially kicks off this morning in Oakland.
In an effort to get the city of Oakland to increase its minimum wage, the group Lift Up Oakland gathered at Fruitvale Plaza before setting out to collect signatures.
People focused on raising Oakland's minimum wage are gathering signatures to try to put the issue on the ballot. Yesterday, the Lift Up Oakland Coalition was among the groups hitting the pavement at the Fruitvale BART station.
And it's just not enough for working families to survive on. They can't make ends meet, and they can't put food on the table or clothes on their kids' backs.
There's a new study says raising the minimum wage in Oakland could really boost the economy.
It's about human dignity. It's about a person feeling proud about themselves when you can put food on the table. And unfortunately, as great as Oakland is, and the great as the economy is in the Bay Area, unfortunately, a lot of people don't have a chance to participate.
Researchers at UC Berkeley found raising Oakland's minimum wage to $12.25 an hour could cause paychecks to go up at least $115 million. The study says that would mean fewer people would depend on social services and they'd spend more money at local businesses.
I can't build my own life on $10.25.
I think the biggest thing most people don't realize is that minimum wage workers or low wage income workers are not teenagers.
When you pay people more money, the community benefits by getting more money into the local businesses.
Raising to $12.25 would mean a whole lot.
De poder ahorrar un poquito.
We need to raise the minimum wage.
Raise the minimum wage to $12.25.
Vote yes on Measure FF.
Vote yes on Measure FF.
In Oakland, the union-backed campaign to raise the city's minimum wage next year to $12.25 an hour has submitted more than 33,000 signatures to get the proposal on the November ballot. The Lift Up Oakland Coalition has been gathering for the past 3 months.
So in Oakland, an overwhelming vote to raise the minimum wage. There are 81% of voters approving Measure FF. It will raise Oakland's minimum wage from $9 an hour to $12.25 an hour. That'll start in March.
So we wanted to show the commercial twice just to make sure you guys saw it.
Yeah, I know, I'm sorry.
No, I cut both. Anyways, it's my fault. Always my fault. That's how this relationship works. So you guys didn't figure that out already? So we found out early, as you can see here, that the media was going to cover this issue. There was no doubt about that. You know, it's a great story. I mean, there's a bunch of former journalists, current journalists here. It has conflict. It has all of the great things that people love to hear. But what we found is that we needed to craft stories and create the right messaging, and that was actually more of the challenge than you often have. And I hate this saying when people say this to me, and I'm a pretty easygoing guy, but it's a great way to get me to really get angry when they say, "Well, all press is good press." No, it's not. No. And everybody here is a communicator. I'm a political consultant. I communicate, yes, but communications needs to serve a goal. And our goal here is to win campaigns. So that's what we do. That's our, this is a tool that we use. And, we found that we could get folks to talk about really great stories that were personal and specific. And it was great, the HRC presentation, all the stories today. The most powerful stories that you can tell are personal and specific. Think about what the most powerful thing somebody can say to you is. I love you. You're hired. You have a raise. I mean, why are those powerful? Because they're specific and they're personal. That's like, the marriage. You can get married. So we were able to really craft those. And that's why if you look at our coverage, you look at the TV spot, these are workers. These aren't, talking heads or And Jen will talk about some of the issues that that generated. But, you know, they're real workers, so that's really important. The other thing that we had a real opportunity to do is, you know, so voters see ballot measures, legislation, as solutions to problems. So oftentimes you have to spend a lot of the campaign creating the problem. This time in the Bay Area, people already saw this problem. Wage inequality, it's a problem. People believe that. So we could spend our time talking about why this is a solution to the problem and not creating the problem. The final thing that made this really powerful messaging is, you know, so much people are so cynical about politics. I mean, probably rightly so. Maybe, I don't know. But this is one of those things where it's not voting for some guy or some gal who's maybe going to go do something that's going to maybe change something. It was a direct action that you could take to help people. Vote, you raise the minimum wage. I mean, who wouldn't want to give those people a raise? I mean, look at them. They look great, you know, and you know, that was a really powerful thing. And then the final thing that we did is we answered the obvious question. So every campaign has an obvious question that it has to answer. In this case, ours is who's going to be impacted? Not just negatively. People are, you know, small businesses, and we answered that question, but also who's going to be impacted positively? That was the real question that we had to answer in this campaign. I think we did a very good job of answering who's going to be impacted in this race.
Right. And as Jim said, having the right spokespeople are important. We were not really surprised, but it was interesting that our polling showed that, again, voters were more interested in who the low-wage workers, who would be impacted, how they would benefit from this measure. We thought we might see voters more concerned about how much is this going to cost me, how much are prices going to increase at the local business, and that perhaps businesses in favor of the measure would be more effective. But that wasn't the case. So we had, as you can see from these photos, these were our press conference to turn in the signatures. We did not suffer from people who wanted to be in the camera shot, or who didn't want to be in the camera shot. Plenty of people from our coalition organizations, and there's a mayoral candidate or two in those photos as well, wanted to be in the shot. So what we had to do in terms of managing the coalition and navigating that was really have them agree on the plan and focus on it to use workers as spokespeople. It wasn't going to be the executive director of your organization who was going to be the spokesperson. Maybe on occasion we needed a spokesperson from one of the organizations, but that was not what was going to move us ahead and win this campaign for us. So that coalition navigation is really important. I'm sure you find it in the work you do. In a campaign that is being run by a coalition, it's especially important. So, you know, in that coalition, we really focused on a few things. We kept it small. We kept our steering committee about 8 to 10 organizations, each made up of decision makers around the table. We told them, you have to send somebody to our meetings, to our calls, who can make a decision on that call if it needs to be made. You know, don't send somebody to take the information back to you. So we focused on decision makers agreeing on goals. The steering committee had to be made up of organizations who brought resources, either people or money. It was not a feel-good campaign.
No, it felt good. But
it felt good, but you know, you have to win and have to stay focused. And so, can you get people to events, people to do work, or do you have some money where we can hire people to do work? Basically the same thing, but that was really important. The group, again, had to be small enough to act and to be nimble, and so we had to be disciplined as well. We were very disciplined, and I think some of the coalition members were surprised when I would not email information. I would number copies of polling data at meetings and collect it back up and know that every number was in sequence, so nothing was missing. And I think a lot of them had never seen this before because, again, as Jim said, a lot of times you're used to just going out and talking about stuff. But we were very disciplined because, you know, we had opponents that we were dealing with, and we didn't want to dilute that coalition. So the coalition was tasked with helping us find low-wage workers who were spokespeople. A lot of them had members who were low-wage workers, worked with restaurants who had low-wage workers, and we ended up having some really great ones who you saw in some of the coverage. John Jones, who was in the TV spot, and then on one of the news clips, he had the security ball cap on, came to us sort of peripherally, and I had to kind of convince one of our coalition members that he would be amazing because his story was so compelling. And again, that's what it's about, is finding those compelling stories of people who are impacted. He is formerly incarcerated, is now was working at a security guard at a local fast food restaurant and raising his family, about to welcome another child. And not only did he work his job, spend time with his family, they would come to our campaign events, but he also volunteered a lot with his church and organizing other low-wage workers. And he turned out to be just really one of the most compelling spokespeople that we had. This was another woman, Essence, and her son. One of our coalition members found her because they walked into a local shop. I think it was one of those kind of popcorn, candy corn shops, and she was working behind the counter. And they were just struck by how dynamic she was and started talking with her. And this story in the San Francisco Chronicle, the largest paper in the area, this story came out the day after we turned in the signature. So we turned them in on a Friday. We had worked with the Chronicle to have this story come out on a Saturday, and Essence was profiled, and she just did a great job.
Yeah. So those are both great examples of how we crafted coverage. We didn't just, let's go talk, right? And who talked mattered, but also the timing mattered and how we paced it, the pacing of the campaign, those really mattered. Like I said earlier, we used this media coverage to meet political goals. We had this specter of a competing measure all the way up until the end of July. The city council could have placed this on the ballot. They actually had a hearing about it, had a bunch of folks there, and we used the media coverage that we did to really create pressure on them so that they wouldn't move forward. And really just kind of defeated that before it even got to the ballot box. And I often say this, campaigns are usually not won on election day. They're usually won much further back before that. They're way before that. And really, we won the campaign, not in November, but in July, after that we blocked a competing measure. A couple of just things. Research really matters. We did a fair amount of polling. We were fortunate to do that. We also had the UC Berkeley's Labor Center. You guys heard in one of the clips. They did a study on this. We were very fortunate to have that. We did a press conference leading into that city council debate that really helped drive the coverage and drive the discussion. It was a risk, but we did it early. And here's one other thing. Always, if you're going to take a chance in a campaign, take a chance early, don't take it late. Everybody wants to do the October surprise. Do it early when you have time, if it doesn't go well, to fix it. But at the end of the day, the couple things that we'd like you to take away is, one is run your campaign. Don't let somebody else run it for you. Oftentimes, your allies want to run it for you. The press wants to run it for you. Somebody wants to run the campaign for you. And timing and pacing are key. The campaigns are all about pace. They end. It's not like a lot of these projects that don't end. Campaigns end. That's what's great about them, because then you don't have to see these people anymore. They don't have to see me. I'm sure that it goes both ways.
And then also the coalition management is as important as the external communications, because your coalition and your steering committee have to agree and guide it. So work continuously to create that consensus with your steering committee and win your campaign and raise the wage. Next week, Oakland will have the highest minimum wage in the country.
That's awesome. Thanks, guys. Hi. That's exciting. Cheers. All right. people who, it's very loose here. It's fun. I just want to say one more thing about stories that I think are important, especially when you're communicating, and that is, if you have a story and you've been through something, what you represent to somebody who is in the middle of shit is somebody who's out of shit. And sometimes you forget that it's as simple as that. Because when you are in something that feels really awful, you can't see outside of it. And sometimes you can't. And so just simply saying, I have been in this place with as much specificity as you feel comfortable doing, allows somebody to see that there is some place to go. So just think about that. All right. So we are about to close out for the day with Jenny Lawson, AKA the Bloggess. If you are not familiar with Jenny Lawson, step the fuck up. What are you doing? She's an incredible blogger. She is so touching and so inspirational. And when she writes about her own issues with anxiety, it's incredibly great. And she is one of those people who I was just talking about, who when she speaks to you, you feel like, oh, okay, I'm not alone, I'm not a freak, I'm in it. And she's also hilarious. She is amazing. If you've never read her book, Let's Pretend This Never Happened, please. Are we selling the book here? We are? Okay, good. Get it. It's really awesome. And so Jenny's going to talk about her work and her life and just her everything. And it's great because it's going to be a conversation with the University of Florida's own Matt Sheehan. So I'm going to introduce Jenny and Matt. Jenny and Matt.
We can't find Jenny.
What do you mean?
We can't find her. We got the stage managers looking right now.
Jenny's nowhere?
She's not backstage, so
She's somewhere.
You know,
Jenny's spirit animal is a taxidermied animal. So
it is, but I think the only stuffed and furry thing that may be on here right now is me.
Wait, we found her. She's in the bathroom.
Oh, you got her in the bathroom?
Okay. Well,
all right, carry on.
All right. Well, hold on,
so
Travis. We planned for this. Why don't you take the live cam and meet me out here? All right. Jenny? Jenny?
I'm hiding.
Jenny, you're hiding?
I'm hiding.
It's time to go on.
I don't think I can do this.
Okay, I'll take a seat and we'll talk there.
That sounds good.
So, you okay?
Yeah, I thought I took an anxiety pill, and I think it was maybe an Advil, and it's not working well.
Okay, well, you've been fairly vocal and writing about your challenges with anxiety and mental health, and you've created this real big following about it. So how have you coped with that, or how has that helped you?
Well, I'm really lucky that I have a great community of people who are there to talk to me whenever I get scared on the internet, because they're also scared and don't leave their house, and a lot of times I just hide in the bathroom, and a lot of therapy and medicine, and then back into the bathroom again.
Well, by reading your blog and your book, we kind of figured that might happen, which is why we had Plan B here. But we're really happy that you're able to join us here at Frank and to talk about your experience with forming a community and really building a community through humor is a great way of sharing people's stories. What's one lesson that you would share with our audience and our community?
I think that the most important thing that I have learned, well, actually two things. One is that depression lies, and that when you're listening to your head and you are in the middle of a depression, you can't trust it. And then the second thing is that you're not alone, because everybody feels like they're alone. So technically, if you feel like you're alone, you're probably the least alone you've ever been, because everyone is there with you. Does that make sense?
It does. It really does. And you've created that sense of not aloneness through your humor. I think you've got a lot of big fans in our audience and here in Gainesville. Do you feel that you can maybe head out to the audience? We promise that, I know sometimes your husband doesn't allow you to use certain words or swearing, but we're a very safe community. How are you feeling?
I think I'm okay. I think the beta blocker or Advil is kicking in,
Okay.
and I'm gonna trust you that this is gonna be okay.
It will be fine. We're gonna be good. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right, let's go, Jenny.
All right. You ready?
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a...
That was scary.
It was. I'm kind of scared here a little bit, but this is a safe space, and I have to ask Jenny, who's your friend?
This is Professor Higgins. He is my service animal, and I actually he is not mine. He belongs to Florida, so it's not my fault. I have been in love with taxidermy ever since I was a little kid. My father is a taxidermist, and it was a bit of an issue because I'm like a card-carrying member of PETA. And so, but I still struggled with it, and then I realized later, you know what? I can get really old ones that were like roadkill, and that way nothing died, technically. I mean, you did die, but he's still fine. And so I started writing about taxidermy, and it became sort of one of the things that I was known for. And when I came to the hotel, my hotel room was filled with taxidermy, including this guy, Professor Higgins, and also some things I don't even know what they are.
Yeah, we saw that. This is probably the only conference that has a director of taxidermy. But
Which is the best conference.
Special thanks to Allison Clark and the Florida Museum of Natural History for helping with us there. So stuffed animals are kind of a theme for you, or not stuffed animal. I guess they are technically stuffed animals, but that's what we told the hotel we were bringing in, stuffed animals. So that's how we got it through.
Yeah, housekeeping was not happy.
I'm sure that it was quite a surprise.
Yeah.
For them. But on your blog, you've had a couple of your own collection here, which I wanted to highlight, and you can see it right there. But the Harry Potter theme. You like dressing up your animals a little bit.
Yeah, I do. I like to find old ones and then give them a new life. And especially right now I'm really into like steampunk Victorian kind of stuff, which is sort of fascinating. Awesome.
It is, and this one I love too.
Oh yeah. Well, and I buy these things and they're like $10, and my husband's always like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "No, this is gonna be great." And then they become these giant memes on the internet, and he's like, I don't know what you're doing, but I guess keep doing it. Good job, I guess. But yeah.
Well, so just some of your collection. And
Yes.
Victor plays this is one of our favorites here at Florida too, the surprised fox. Crap taxidermy, if any of you like taxidermy, that's a great Twitter. It's not one of yours, but I know you guys, you submit to each other a lot, I believe. Crappy taxidermy,
Yes.
Okay. There's multiple crap taxidermies.
There's a bunch of them. It's big.
Who knew?
It's big.
Who knew? Victor plays a large role in a lot of your stories, and you have a very supportive husband, it seems, although sometimes maybe plays a martyr in some of your stuff. And I made a reference earlier about how he doesn't he advises you against certain words and so forth. But this is a safe space, so feel free to go throughout.
And really, he just says that just because he knows that I like to do everything he tells me not to do.
Okay.
So for the most part, yeah, he's always the straight man on my blog and in my books, but in real life, he's the funny one. So, and I know he's watching this, so. You're the funny one, you win. I'm bringing this home. No, I'm not. I'm gonna try to.
So, sorry, I get the giggles. Frank's all about building communities, and well, that's why we really were interested in bringing you here. Other than we love you, and we get more stuffed animals. It's all about building community, and that's kind of what you've done through it. And some success metrics that we've had, your books and blogs and so forth. You have nearly 400,000 Twitter followers. Your book, which is the Let's Pretend This Never Happened, which Liz mentioned earlier, is a New York Times bestseller. It's the 2,498th most popular book on Amazon.
It was number one the first week. It's been years. I mean.
Well, you got another one coming out, which we'll talk about in a little bit. It's the 28th most popular book in humor. And this is the stat that I found fascinating, and this must make you really feel great, is it's number 40 in biographies, and biographies by women. And I just thought that was amazing. And I know there's fluctuations there. Yeah. So, in your book, you made reference to a conversation that you had with Victor, and I'm quoting here, there aren't even metrics for the shit that I do.
It's true.
It's
absolutely true.
Even though there are metrics. But.
Well, I mean, there kind of are, but not really. I am incredibly lucky, and a lot of times, and I sort of feel bad that I'm going to have to say this out loud when you just said you brought me in to talk about community, because it was sort of an accident. I am very lucky that I have found my tribe, and I think that there is, for everybody in the world, there is, and for me, it's a bunch of intellectual misfits who are socially awkward and ask questions like why Jesus why isn't he classified as a zombie since he came back from the dead? And like those sort of questions. And you live your life and you think, I'm the only one. I'm the weirdo. I'm the one girl who like hides in the bathroom from high school through college and real life forever. And then all of a sudden you realize, oh, okay, maybe I am 1 in 1,000. But then you get it on the internet and you realize 1 in 1,000 adds up. I was really, really lucky because when I was writing for the Bloggess, and I was having these problems with mental illness, and depression was the main one. I've always had anxiety disorder, but you can take medicine for anxiety disorder. And with depression, when you go into a deep depression, it's not like you can pop a pill and be like, woohoo, I'm fine. And I was having these periods of a week to 2 weeks at a time where I couldn't get out of bed. And what I would do is I always had some extra blog posts that I had written. And so when I was in these depressive periods, I would just post an old blog post. And I would go to approve comments and they would be like, you're so funny, oh my gosh, that's hilarious. And I was like, I'm such a fucking liar. Like I have created this false history of myself. And so I decided I would just come out and say, I have depression and I have anxiety disorder, and I was expecting silence, and instead what I heard was a chorus of me too, and I thought it was just me, and I'm the exact same way, and I have never told anybody that. It was shocking and wonderful and freeing. And the really amazing thing that came from that is that I have this thing called the folder of 24. And it was when I first started on my last book tour, I had 24 letters that had come out from people who were actively in the process of planning their suicide and decided not to, not because of anything that I wrote, but because of the response of what they saw. Because they saw 1,000 other people say, oh my God, I thought it was just me. And they realized, I am really not alone. And they got help and they're still alive today. And what I think is, what I think is so awesome about that is that first of all, it's such a wonderful and amazing, thing to be able to be a part of. But what's really amazing is how many people out there who felt like they just threw their voice into the darkness to say, me too, even anonymously, that you may have saved a life just by that one comment and by speaking up, even if it was completely anonymous. And just being able to give people that space to do it and the community support, it makes such a difference. And even though it was accidental, it was really wonderful.
There's an authenticity discussion that we have a lot here at the College of Journalism, particularly in the field of public interest communications, and I'm sure many of you do as well. There's no question that you are speaking authentically, but what sort of toll does that take on you, that you are now the tribal leader?
It is tribal leader. I don't think I would use that term.
Well.
It can be really exhausting. I've had to learn to set limits. I say no to things way more than I say yes. When I am traveling, last week I was in New York, and I'm in Times Square, and I look out my window, and I'm like, anybody else would be like, this is so amazing, let's go, let's do this. And I just was like, I can't do this. I'm gonna stay in this hotel room until someone comes and finds me and says, you need to come to this meeting, and then I'm gonna go home. And that's the right decision for me. And it's not for everybody, but that's what works for me. I also have, I'm really good about setting limits. And I think there's something really wonderful about saying, I can't do this, because it kind of makes everybody else feel like, oh, it's okay to say no too. That on book tour a lot, I would get to the point where I was like, I'm having a really bad time, I need 5 minutes, and I would just duck behind the podium. And people would be like, that's fine, whatever, we'll just talk amongst ourselves. Especially in Texas, because they serve booze at all the bookstores, and so they were drunk anyway. And it was so fantastic, because not only was this feeling of acceptance that you could be who you want to be and everyone has your back, but also so many people showed up on the book tour, and they would be like, I have not left the house in a month, and this is the first time that I left the house, and I didn't want to be here, but I'm here, and I met somebody in line, and now I have somebody who I can, be friends with here in this town, and it's amazing. There are people who are married because they met on the blog, and that's to me is such. I consider myself extremely lucky that I'm part of this community, and I would not say that I'm a leader in any way. It just happens, and I open the space, and good things happen. Knock on wood.
That's phenomenal. So I guess my next question is, what's the first anniversary etiquette? What taxidermied animal do you send to the couple that got married because of your blog?
I'm gonna say stoat.
Stoat. Okay.
Stoat. Yeah, stoat. And they're pretty cheap, which is good. And that's nice. And they're standing up, so it's much easier to put clothes on them. And if you get the really skinny ones, they can wear Barbie clothes, but they open in the back, so you can't. You know what? I like holding them this way because it looks like I'm breastfeeding. This is nice. This is good. I need a sling, some sort of a baby sling.
Sorry.
I'll make it trend. We'll get. Maybe.
We're the photographers. You've also, so in addition to the folder of 24, you've done a couple other projects, and one that particularly, although we're in February, just closed again this year, right? Which is the James Garfield Christmas Project.
The James Garfield Christmas Miracle, which is the most ridiculous. This actually is my favorite project ever. I want to say it was the 5th year? I think it was the 5th year, yeah. Okay, so that's James Garfield. And I saw him at an estate sale, and I was like, he's so fucking happy, look at him. Oh my gosh, he's me. He's all broken, but he's like, I'm trying to be happy. And I told my husband, I was like, I'm getting this. And he was like, no. You're not, you don't let me spend money on crap. And I was like, you're calling James Garfield crap? And he was like, you've named it? No, stop it. And so I was like, I will make the money back up. Just get him. And
So I did. He was $90, and which was like a lot of money for a taxidermy boar. And so I went back on the internet and I was like, I am gonna make these homemade Christmas cards with James Garfield, and I need for like 9 of you to buy them for $10 each so that my husband will stop bitching at me. And that was one of them. It just got all kinds of motherfucking festive in here, y'all. And what happened was like tons of people bought them, and I ended up, I can't remember, like I made like thousands of dollars. And so I took that money and I was like, okay, that was unexpected money. So if there's anybody out there, this was at Christmas time, if there's anybody out there who is struggling, because I grew up super, super poor, and I know what it's like, and if there's anybody who needs toys for their kids and that you don't know how to get them, I'm going to buy a whole bunch of $30 gift cards, and the first, 30 people or so who say that they need one, I'll send it to you. And so the first 30 were gone very quickly, and then the 31st person came, and the 32nd, and so I went to talk to my husband, and he was like, well, just cover it. Like we can do it. We can do a few. But by the time I got back to check the internet, someone else had said, I'll do the 31st person. I'd like to do that. And then somebody else said, I'll do the 32nd person. What happened was thousands of people stepped up and said, can you match me with somebody who needs help? And not only were I want to say like $40,000 worth of gift certificates were given back and forth, but it was so amazing that somebody would get matched up with somebody, and then they would be like, you know what, that was too much, and I don't need that much, so I'm going to pass it on to the next person. And then somebody else would be like, I want to get this for my kids, but to thank the person, I'm gonna knit mittens for the next 10 people, or I make this, well, it ended up becoming enormous and big and bigger and bigger, and we have done it every year. And as a matter of fact, the second year, I wasn't even gonna do it because it was exhausting. And the second year, all these people came out and said, I was a recipient. I'm just doing so much better this year. Can I give? And all of the people who had gotten the first year were the ones who were like, oh, I'm so excited, I get to sponsor this. And I want to say we're around like $250,000 has been given, which is insane. And it's so lovely and underground, and there's no sponsors, and nobody writes about it. It's just very quiet, and it's so fantastic. And you see these people who have made like long-term friends with the people that they've been matched with, and they still, there's even like a Facebook page, which I'm not even in control of it, but there's a Facebook page of people who got together because of James Garfield and who help other people and pass it on. And every once in a while I go on and I'm like, what are y'all doing? Okay, cool.
So is it going to continue?
I think so, yeah. I think as long as it can stay, authentic and real and small, and it's lovely. It's really lovely. We've actually lately we've switched a little bit more. We still do the, given to other kids and wish lists and stuff like that, but we do a lot of bags for homeless kids for Project Night Night, because they were running like really low during like hurricanes and things like that. So we sponsor that a lot, and we've been able to fulfill a lot of their campaigns. And it's kind of funny too, because I always look at it and I'm like, there's so many things that I want to do, and I want to get involved with a charity or something, and they don't really want to touch me. There's an awful lot of like, no, I'm sorry, what do you write about? It's a little bit edgy, and no, you're getting, so I really have to go out and search for and be like, hey, can I, donate to your charity? Are you okay with being associated with me? And it's surprising how often I'll hear that from other bloggers as well, who are like, I want to find a good fit, but I'm afraid that whoever I partner with is going to be like, well, you can't say that, or you can't say that, which is why I've never had a sponsor or any of that. But I do think it's getting better.
That's great. From my perspective here, Higgins, when you were just describing some of the drawbacks of partnering with you, he just looked like he's going, girlfriend, please.
Oh, he is. Yeah, he's like, or he's giving me a high five. He's like, yeah, you tell him.
Yeah.
it's both. It's both. It's getting better. It's getting better.
Choose your meaning, I guess. Another project that you're kind of known for, or at least helped to raise the profile of, is the Red Dress Project.
Yes. The Red Dress Project, it was years ago. I have always wanted, this sounds incredibly stupid, I have always wanted to have a giant red ball gown. And I don't know why, but I just always wanted one. And I have no reason to wear it and no place to wear it. And I finally said, you know what? I am worth doing something incredibly stupid. And so I went and found a friend who makes these gowns, and she bought like 800 yards of like crinoline and made this enormous red dress that like laces up the back so that it would fit no matter what size I was. And I called one of my friends and who was a photographer, and she was like, well, we need someplace green, we'll take a picture of you. And it's Houston, so the only place green is a cemetery. So I couldn't fit the dress. I couldn't fit the dress in the car because it was so big. So I had to I wore my pajamas, and then when I got there, I put the dress on, so I'm naked in a cemetery. And I'm pretty sure you go to hell for that. But it was worth it because those pictures were awesome. But I ended up writing about it, and I wrote about the fact that sometimes you have to do something stupid and irrelevant and crazy, and those are the moments that make your life. And there's nothing stupid about giving yourself a present and being nice to yourself. And that, for me, the red dress was a red dress. But for a lot of people, the red dress is crossing a finish line, or owning a house for the first time, or graduating from college, or whatever it is that thing is that you think, oh, I'm never going to be able to do this, or oh, I'm not worth it. And what happened was somebody who read my blog left a comment and said, I'm severely agoraphobic. I have not left my house in months, but I'm going to go to this conference in New York, and that's my red dress. That's my finish line because I've been working on this and I'm going to do it. And I happened to be going to that same conference, and I said, I'll bring the red dress and you can wear it. And so I met her in the hotel room and took pictures, and she cried and I cried, and I shared the pictures, and someone else said, you know what, I am 45 and I just bought my first house, and I would love to take a picture of me wearing the red dress on the porch of my house. So I sent it to her, and then someone else said, you know what, I am transitioning, and I'm gonna come out as a woman to my coworkers for the first time. I would love to be able to wear this red dress. And so I was like, yeah, yes, absolutely. So I actually went and shot her myself because I was like, I'm gonna do these pictures, they're gonna be awesome. It has gone all over the world. And what was really amazing is so many people were inspired by it that other people started to say, I have this red dress that I had from prom, and it's a size 16. Does anybody want it? And somebody would be like, oh my gosh, yes, I want it. And all of a sudden, there were thousands of red dresses being sent all over the place, and they would just go up on Facebook, and people would be like, here's this one, and it's a size 0. Here's this one, it's a size 22. Here's this one. And people would post, first of all, their pictures, but secondly, all of these photographers got involved and were like, if you have a great story, like if you're doing this to celebrate something, just let me know and I will do your shoot for free. And there are so many amazing photographs online and stories and things that just like break your heart and make your heart. Even a child who was 9 and was suffering from very, very severe mental illness and wore her own red dress and absolutely loved it, and it was really incredible. It was, people are good.
They are.
Yeah.
They are. You often use a lot of humor in your blog, and I was struck by one post that you wrote following the Ferguson decision, because it was remarkably, and I wouldn't say unusually, but for you, unusually devoid of humor. What prompted you to write it like that, or what sort of reaction did you get from your audience?
For the most part, I stay away from anything that is heavy, because I kind of feel like when people come to my blog, they come there because maybe they're sad and they want something, light, and I feel like it's my responsibility, really, to be light and happy. I had a real problem though during Ferguson, and then the resultant after that, and the non-trial, and there came a point where I just couldn't write anything funny, and I was really depressed and sad, and not just a chemical depressed, but really just thinking, I just hate the world right now, and I just don't like the way that things are, and I can't do anything about it, and I can't find a funny way to write about it. I don't know what to do. And I noticed so many people in my Facebook stream who either were so angry or completely silent or completely confused. And so I decided to write about the feeling of compassion, and about that if you're feeling pain, that means that your empathy is working, and that I have to keep telling myself that this is uncomfortable and awful, and it hurts. And it hurts to see other people yell, and it hurts to see other people in pain and scared, and it hurts to see other people confused and not understand. It hurt. Everyone is hurt on every level. But that pain, recognizing that you have that pain, makes you a human. And that was really helpful for me to, first of all, put that out there. And secondly, to be able to say, this is an important thing. And I'm not the person that you need to be listening to. Like, there are other voices who are talking about this better, but it's okay if you are confused or angry or scared, because we're all that same way. And I didn't get a single troll. Everybody was incredibly kind and nice and honest about their fears or their confusion or their issues. And it was really, actually really wonderful, and helped me over a hurdle that I was having. And actually that was the big thing that I got back from that, was a reminder that people are good. Because you'd see all these people who would share it and say, yes, I didn't have the words for it either, and I haven't wanted to say anything because I don't know what to say, but yes, it hurts.
So let's pretend this never happened, sorry. We'll
Let's
not
do
pretend
both.
this didn't happen, but we read some of the success metrics. It's moved up and down Amazon. You've got another book coming out in the next 12 months, right?
I do, yeah. Probably in the fall. I was drunk at the time that I pitched it, because I was like, hey, you know what I should do? What if I write a funny book about mental illness? And my editor was like, sure. And then I had to write it, and it was really hard. It's really, really hard. But it is almost finished, and it's gotten good, I don't know, what are they called, pre-reviews? Like the ARCs and whatever. So it's hard, it's different, it's still really funny, really irreverent. Like, seriously, everybody's gonna be offended. It starts with an apology. But I do go, as a matter of fact, I think it might be a bit of a surprise for a lot of my readers, because I talk a lot more about, in the blog I talk about depression and anxiety disorder, and I think so many people at one point or another have that. But we have a tendency to, like, that's the sort of the chic sort of, like, that's then okay. And I kind of talk a little bit more about self-harm and about a personality disorder that I have, and so I am a little afraid, honestly, of how it's going to be received, and whether it will be received in the same, oh, I totally feel you sort of way, or in a like, oh, what? Let me take a step back here. That sounds dangerous. What are you doing? So, but I think it'll be good. It was hard to write, but hopefully it will be easy to read. And one of the people who read it said his thing that he sent me back was, it's funny as hell, and it will help a lot of people out of theirs. And I was like, all right. Okay.
And throughout the blog and your book, you've been remarkably open about your own evolution in dealing with mental health and putting yourself in uncomfortable situations. So this looks like it's another one, including one of my favorite quotes when you were going to a bloggers group our Bloggers Retreat, you said, girls are like small bears, cute to look at, but far too dangerous to have lunch with. Which is a similar outlook I had about 20 years ago when I was 14, but 13. Has writing the book and the blog helped you become more comfortable with where you are and who you are?
Absolutely, absolutely. I used to be very much I don't trust girls, just generally, and I now look back on that and think, oh, what was that all about? Like, I'm not really sure if that was just, you know, a hangover from high school, which is awful, or what it was. But what I found is that other people are much more accepting of me than I am accepting of me, and so I have to keep reminding myself of that. The other thing that I do, and I've talked about this a little bit before, but I do struggle with lots of different things, including anxiety and imposter syndrome and feeling like I'm just a giant, worthless nothing. As a matter of fact, even here, I'm like, really? Like, follow the Pulitzer Prize? Like, I don't even know how to spell Pulitzer. And I've got a bobcat. And the story that I always tell is I was doing my audiobook, and this was before the book had come out, so I didn't know that it was going to be, you know, a bestseller, and I was really scared, and every time I would talk, they could hear it in my voice. And my voice would crack, and every time they would be like, cut, nope, no. And they were going to replace me, and I just had like this one shot to prove that I could do it, and I was like, it's my story, I have to read it, I can't let somebody else read it. And they were like, why don't you just go for a walk, come back, you can come back later, and we'll, you know, and maybe you'll be better. And I left thinking that they were gonna like call Betty White, because that's like, she had just left. And I went out, and Neil Gaiman, who, if you don't know who he is, go read everything he has ever written. I like sent him a tweet, and I was like, hey, you're really good at, you know, reading stuff. Like, can you tell me, I'm about to lose this opportunity, what do I do? And he texted me back a single thing that said, I tweeted back a single thing that said, pretend you're good at it. And I went in there, and I pretended I was someone who could do it, and I went through the entire page without them stopping me once, and the producer was like, what did you just do? Because whatever you just did, you need to do more of it. And I was like, I just did a lot of cocaine. And then I was like, no, I'm kidding. I got some good advice. And but even to this day, I still pretend you're good at it before I go out on any stage, and that's what I do. Right before I'm just about to run away, I look at it and I think, one day I'm going to be able to scratch out the pretend and just be, you're good at it. But until then, pretending is working.
Well, Jenny. I think you can scratch out that pretend. Jenny, thanks so much for joining us here at Frank. We loved having you, and I hope you come back.
Oh my God, so awesome. Thanks, you guys. So I'm gonna say this really fast. Along those lines, someone once said to me, and I think it's really awesome along these lines, they said, you matter, act like it. So take that as you go. I'm going to ask you to leave really quickly in the scope of being super respectful people. Gather outside and make your plans, but we have a theater space that's coming in, so let's be super awesome because we ran a little bit over, and bring ourselves out to the front. I do have some information I forgot to bring up. The scavenger hunt is at 6:30. Check on page 3 of your program for all the details on how to get to it. because I didn't bring my piece of paper. So go to the Woolly. Go to the Woolly. Look up the Woolly.